Malika Henderson, and welcome to On Background. The Supreme Court has agreed to hear two new cases that challenge the Affordable Care Act, also known as Obamacare, at issue a mandate that requires companies to provide contraceptive coverage to their employees. Two companies, arts and crafts chain Hobby Lobby and Pennsylvania cabinet-making company, a cabinet-making company called Conestoga Wood Specialties, argue that certain contraceptives, like the morning after pill, violate their religious beliefs. The Food and Drug Administration argues that emergency contraception is contraception as well and must therefore be covered. So is this a political issue or a religious one? Should companies be granted an exception to the law because of religious beliefs? And what does it mean for women's health rights? The court will decide in the spring. But with me now to debate the issue is Jess McIntonsh. She's from Emily's List, and Charlotte Hayes from the Independent Women's Forum. Thanks for being with me today. I'm going to start right off with you, Charlotte. I'm going to read something Patty Murray, of course, a Democrat. This is what she had to say in talking about this law. We can allow legal precedent to dictate that the personal beliefs of those in positions of power can block those who aren't from making their own health care decisions. That is a slippery slope that could lead to bosses dictating everything from an employee's ability to access HIV treatment to their ability to vaccinate their children. What do you make of that argument, essentially the slippery slope argument?
Well, the employers are not trying to dictate health coverage or contraception either. This is not about contraception. It's about religious freedom. They're not saying, gee whiz, you can't use contraception. They're saying, don't make us pay for something. Don't make us buy you something that we don't think is moral. Notre Dame, the University of Notre Dame, has just refiled their case for relief from the contraception mandate. And the president of Notre Dame said in his statement, we have not tried to prevent women from using contraception. We don't want to pay for it because that would forfeit our religious rights. So if anybody's trying to impose their views on others, it's people like Patty Murray. And by the way, contraception is inexpensive, and there are lots of programs for low-income women. So it's really about dictating these Christian companies and people.
And you had from Obama carve-outs for religious institutions and some nonprofits. Just what do you make of that argument, the religious freedom argument that essentially Obamacare is trampling on folks' ability to express their religion in the way they want to?
I would like to back up a little bit and remind folks that it's 2013. I think women across the country are finding themselves in a really surprising position of having to relitigate fights over birth control when we're sitting here in the 21st century. Women want to be talking about jobs, they want to be talking about the economy, and Republicans have consistently attempted to curtail access to health care, specifically birth control. They've done it in state legislatures, they've done it in Congress, they're doing it in the courts. We saw this obsessive focus in 2012, and it resulted in a historic gender gap. I mean, more women turned out for Democrats than at any other point in history.
And Charlotte, Democrats have been very successful, right?
It's absolutely successful. They've absolutely been successful, and that's why she said what she said. Republicans do not want to relitigate contraception.
That's great.
Wait a minute. It's the law of the land. What we want to litigate, what we want to defend is religious liberty. We think, look, have at it on contraception. We love, if you want to use it, have at it.
A lot of people use it, apparently.
It's big popular, I'm told.
Yeah.
What we don't want is people who don't believe it is moral to have to pay. Now, do you admit that there's a religious issue here that people can say, I think this is immoral? In this country, we've always honored religious freedom. When we had the draft, we said if you're a conscientious objector, you can get out.
Right.
What about with religious freedom?
And I think that the president has done an excellent job of carving out exemptions. Hobby Lobby is a for-profit corporate employer.
So if you make a profit, you don't have religious freedom.
I think that there have always been some men who do not trust women to make these decisions on their own. I think we are looking at bosses like, I'm sure that he's
But
a
I mean, in
wonderful
this
boss.
case,
I bet
right?
he lets you take your kids to work.
It's a very special carve-out. They're not against all contraception, right? They're against a very specific
Hobby Lobby is
contraception.
against the abortifacient. The
morning
Conestoga,
sort of-
I think, is against contraception. They're Mennonites, and they have the right to be against it.
And going back to your slippery slope argument, there are several religions that object to HIV testing, that object to alcoholism, treating cirrhosis of the liver, object to mental illness,
And
healthcare,
I mean, is that,
vaccinations.
people always go to the slippery slope argument. What would you say if a company said, we don't want to give HIV treatment for whatever reason, or blood transfusions, because some people think that blood transfusions go against the Bible or their religious faith? What do you say to that?
I'm not a lawyer, and I really don't know what I would say to that, but I know what I would say to this, and that I do not believe that these companies or individuals should forfeit their religious freedom. And no, I don't think the boss are big, mean men who don't trust women. I think they just have a religious reservation.
I think the fact that we treat birth control differently than we're not willing to discuss the possible implications in terms of vaccines, in terms of HIV testing, in terms of any of the other things that Senator Murray brought up in her statement. I think the fact that we treat birth control specifically differently sends a really strong message to women that Republicans are trying to roll back the clock on their rights and freedoms.
Republicans are not trying to roll back the clock on their rights and freedom. We don't, look, in the consensus in the 1930s began to develop that birth control is a right of women. By the 1960s,
And you had Mitt Romney stand up and say it was fine.
it was absolutely a right by women. I'm Catholic. I buy the church teaching, but I wouldn't impose it on you. However,
But if it worked for you,
no, I wouldn't impose it on you. If you work for me and you want birth control pills, I say go for them. Even
but
though
you say pay for them for herself.
Here's me. Buy them yourself.
Right.
Not
I
trying
mean,
to keep you from getting them.
Coverage is access. I think everybody understands how difficult it is to get medication and medical
Oh,
services
I
that your
don't
insurance
understand
company
that.
doesn't.
Listen, any teenage girl can get birth control.
I mean, currently, in terms of who pays for contraception, most private insurance companies do. Millions of women rely on private insurance. 9 in 10 employer-based insurance plans cover a full range of contraceptives. 28 states have laws in place requiring insurers to cover the full range of FDA-approved contraceptives, contraceptive drugs and devices. So that's the status quo now.
That's the status quo, but I still say if you religiously don't want to do this, or if you didn't want to serve in Vietnam, our country has traditionally, since the Bill of Rights, accorded you this freedom.
What's your sense, Jess, if the court rules a certain way, if they rule in favor of these two companies, what does this mean for Obamacare?
I mean, obviously, it's concerning, I think, for women in America if that happens. Obamacare did an excellent job of expanding women's access to health care, especially preventative services, of which birth control is one. So should the court rule the other way, I think a lot of women are going to be out of luck in terms of what they can get from their employer's insurance. And that's going to mean women have different rights depending on who they work for, which is not at all what we want in this country. I think electorally it has massive implications. You're talking about, 70% of Americans believe that birth control is preventative coverage and ought to be treated the same way as such. 99% of sexually active women have used birth control at some point in their life. You don't get to 99% without including Democrats and Republicans and Southern women and religious women. I mean, this is going to have implications across the map in lots of states and lots of races.
And something I imagine, Charlotte, as a Republican, as a conservative, you should be worried about. I mean, if
absolutely. I would say that the Democrats have demagogued this issue. They have portrayed Republicans as somebody who care about your birth control. Oh, wow. Republicans have no platform, no interest in your birth control.
I guess, how do you thread that needle, and avoid, as you say, being demagogued? I mean, it has
it's a hard thing to do. It's a hard thing to do because, as Jess just said, Republicans want to litigate contraception. Nothing could be further from the truth. We want people who don't want to pay for this not to have to pay for it. We're not stopping any women from using contraception. And so, you don't even have to thread the needle. There's a difference between saying, I'm going to stop you from doing something, and saying, hey, I'm not going to buy that from you. Now, unless you're a 3-year-old and your parents say, I'm not going to buy that from you, not buying it doesn't have that much impact.
I think that this sort of disrespect and disregard for the economic realities of American women is one of the reasons why they come out for Democrats in such high numbers. Women have it tough.
Look, women would like jobs, and
Yes.
that's what they should come out for. They should come out for an unregulated economy where they can get jobs.
And we can talk about equal pay
Less
next time if
regulated.
you want.
Oh, I'd love to talk about that. That's one of my favorite issues.
What do you got? And this is just completely off topic. Thanks for the session on this issue. But keeping on the issue of women, 2016, everybody's talking about Hillary Clinton. Is there a Republican woman? Who would be the first Republican woman president?
Oh, golly, we have some great Republican women. Now, bear in mind, I don't vote for somebody because you're a woman or you're
Right.
not. I vote on policies. And when people say we need more women in Congress, they're Democrats as a rule, and they're not saying, gee, I wish I could find a Lady Thatcher. But we've got great women. McMorris Rogers, I think, is just terrific. I
House,
like
yep.
Kelly Ayotte. We've got great women. And I wouldn't
You think
be
any of them are going to run in 20? It's going to be a crowded field on the
I have
Republican
no
side.
idea.
Yeah.
I would certainly like for one of them to run.
Yeah. And of course, Hillary.
We are certainly hopeful that Hillary will make that decision. But if she doesn't, there is
Elizabeth
a fantastic
Warren,
bench
Jill
of women
Brand.
who have answered to senator and governor and secretary, and they're ready for the next title.
Oh, I left out the South Carolina governor.
Nikki
She's
Haley.
fabulous.
Yeah,
We
yeah.
love her.
I would love to see more Republican women.
All righty, guys. Thanks for this very spirited. I barely needed to be here, which is nice.
Well,
You guys
thank
we
you for
enjoy
being
having
here.
you. Thanks for having us.
Jess McIntonsh, Emily's List, Charlotte Hayes from the great state of Mississippi, Independent Women's Forum. Thanks, guys, for being here.
Thank you.
That's our show for today. Thanks again to our guests and to you for joining us, too. Now it's time for our Twitter question of the day. Do you think companies should be eligible for religious exemptions from providing certain health care services for their employees? Tweet us your answers at background and use that hashtag postback, and we'll see you right back here tomorrow.